The feast was reaching its end. It was now time for the cake. The cake was passed out very carefully to each of the men now sitting at the center table. Never was a dish served that had so many watching the eating of it as the yearly bean cake. Those who sat at the table had proven themselves as men to the people that were still in fit condition. Peop- hmm. Those who sat at the table had proven themselves as men to the people, and were still in fit condition to fight and hunt. It was important that they were strong, for who would want a weak king to bring in the next year? All of these strong men slowly ate their cake, eyes flittering to those around them as the whole of the rest of the people watched them. It was Robin who pulled from his mouth the dark, hard-baked bean. A roar of applause filled the hall, and he was swept from his chair and manhandled up to sit on the throne on the top of the platform. A horn of mead was thrust in his hand, and a crown of woven evergreen branches placed upon his head. The musicians began a raucous tune, and the rest of the folks began celebrating their new king. Robin did his best to look pleased. He gave himself over to the night, drank much mead, encouraged the revelry around him, and pulled many a girl up to his lap for a quick kiss and a quick feel. He put on a grand show, and all of the gathered people were happy. They had their king, young and strong, and this next year would be all the better for it. His sacrifice would bring them hardy crops, good hunting, and healthy livestock. Though the nights were long and cold, that would soon change, all thanks to Harabin. Hail Harabin, king of the bean! The next week was one of debauchery for the entire gathering. Everyone had brought their extra stores, and between the days of politicking for the rulers of the various smaller tribes, the nights were filled with huge campfires, matches being made, less permanent trysts, drinking and tales being told, all presided over by Robin. He sat in his throne, drank his mead, and occasionally joined in the merriment. He would reign for 2 weeks before the ceremony to bring in a strong new year. His mother, Emma, had taken some time to herself to have a bit of a cry. Her husband Bertram had been selected 10 years prior, and she had no other children. But she was proud of both of the men in her life. Her husband's sacrifice had provided the people with a good year, and she was sure her son would as well. She would be moving in with her sister's family after the winter was through to help raise her children. At least she still had family. Some had been left with less. In the second week, Robin ruled that he and a small group of hunters from his tribe should be allowed to go and hunt what game was left to them in the depths of winter. He was one of the best hunters they had, and stated that though his sacrifice would bring them bounty, he wanted a last chance to provide it for his people whilst he lived as well. He took with him 2 others, the brothers Faro and Rocco, both highly praised for their skills, and returned home each night with the game they had slain. Robin would be given the choicest morsels as they were cooked as he led the nightly celebrations. On the 5th day of their hunting, Robin, Pharaoh, and Rocco were taking a rest as the nightly celebrations were wearing them down. They had bagged a few hares at this point and were sitting near a stream in the forest. A fresh snow began to fall, and the brothers suggested heading back before the storm overcame them. Robin mocked them for their weariness and pulled the skin, which he had filled with strong drink in it, telling them to warm up so that they would be able to continue for the hunt for a bit longer. Stating that he only had this day left before he would need to prepare for the ceremony, and that he wanted to provide more for the people before he could no longer hunt, he convinced them to drink with him. The brothers drank, and as they talked and reminisced together on the bank of the stream, they began to drift off to sleep. When Robin was sure they were sleeping, he left them with the hares they had, and swiftly walked upstream in the shallows where his oil-skinned boots mostly protected his feet. When he finally reached a point he knew of that made a good crossing, he carefully crossed on the slick stones and made his way as craftily as possible deep into the woods. As an experienced hunter and tracker, he covered his tracks as best he could and made for a tree which had a large hollow in its base. The hollow faced inwards in a clump of ancient timbers, and had been much dug out by whatever had taken residence in it long ago. Since the loss of his father, Robin had been coming to it off and on when he had no one accompanying him, and digging it out further, as well as ensuring that a thorny shrub grew before its opening, to hide it from all but the most watchful eye. Within the base of the hollow he had left for himself a number of thickly furred hides he had gathered, some skins of water and mead, and some jerky, along with clay pots to be used for his waste. The hollow was large, enough for him to move about in a bit, but not so very spacious that he could stand or walk. He draped a hide that he had prepared beforehand with bits of mud and bark stuck to it to cover the entry to the hollow, and settled himself down, wrapped tightly in the furs, to weather out the storm and the next few days. Though he couldn't provide himself a fire, the enclosed space with the furs bundled around him kept him warm enough, and he hoped that the current storm would work itself up to cover any tracks that he might not have covered. Robin was not going to die. Though he had taken part every year in the ritual, he had even been a part of the ceremony for his own father, he didn't truly believe in it. The loss of his father had only solidified in his mind that it was superstitious nonsense. Whether he died or not, the sun would rise after the longest night of the year, and the luck of the various tribes was down to just that, luck. He was certainly not willing to give up his own life for this silliness. Other peoples did different rituals, and they all believed that theirs was the true one. Who was to say that they were wrong, and that it was his life that was required to make the sun return and the nights grow shorter? Was his sacrifice, one of the best hunters of his tribe, really necessary for the world to continue on its way? He would prove to them that it was not. He would return to them after a few days, and they would see that he was still alive and the sun was still plowing its way through the heavens, and that they could stop murdering their sons and fathers for its sake. With that in mind, he curled up to sleep. He had been sleeping very little over the past few days, and now, as settled and safe as he could be, he fell into a deep slumber. When he woke, it was late into the night. He stooped up and pulled ever so slightly on the hide covering the entry to the hollow. The moon was high in the sky, and a fair amount of snow had fallen, burying the bottom of the hollow and its covering by at least as deep as his hand. The shrub before it was completely covered as well. He felt safe. Robin ate and drank of his supplies and put the jars to use before falling back to sleep. When he woke next, another little peek told him it was daylight. What would have been his last day had he not enacted this plan. The snow had quit falling, and the sounds of the forest surrounded him. He wondered a bit at what was going on back at the gathering of the tribes. He hoped that Pharaoh and Rocco weren't in too much trouble for returning without him. Perhaps they had passed on his lie that he wanted to get one last big hunt in, and had gone on without him, then maybe got lost in the storm. He couldn't see them turning on him, though he had tricked them, but they might not realize that was what he intended to have happen. Either the others would be waiting for him or looking for him, hopefully assuming that he was merely lost. He supposed he would hear something eventually. As the sun rose higher, his suppositions proved to be true. He could hear voices faintly in his little hole. They weren't near him yet, but there were people looking for him. He dared not move much, or try to check by peeking out the hide over the opening. It may let out a little bit of steam in the cold outside, and that could damn him. So far, the voices all seemed to be coming from the direction that he had last parted with the brothers. He knew they would be over where he was eventually. Fortunately, the gathering was at his home village, so only those of the people who lived there had a chance of knowing this spot. He had never shared it with anyone. He had kept it a secret since he had found it. He'd used it before when he was hunting alone as a place to catch some sleep. Whatever it was that had once used it at home had abandoned it before he had found it, and with his scent on it, it seemed that nothing else ever wanted to move in. As the day went on, the voices came closer. Some were shouting at him as though he were lost. Others were calling him out as a coward, abandoning them as their king in sacrifice. He could hear Pharaoh and Rocco amongst them, cursing him as a damned fool for leaving them to go off on his own. Either the brothers had been properly tricked, or they were at least trying to convince the others that that was indeed the case behind his absence. His heart was warmed by this. He was glad of their confidence in him, or perhaps just their unwillingness to throw blame on him. Though he heard the voices and the crashing of people through the branches in his part of the forest for a good while, they eventually moved on. Some had come quite close to the little cluster of trees in which he was hidden, but none investigated it, it seemed. He relaxed again after they had moved far enough away that the voices were distant, eventually fading off. Night was falling soon after he last heard them. Tonight was the longest night of the year. The next day, the entire next year, was to be bought by his blood this night. But he would show them. He would return when the sun had fully risen and show them that his life wasn't the cost of the sun, that it came whether he lived or died. He would not leave his mother alone. He'd seen how broken she was these past 2 weeks, though she tried to hide it. He remembered how she had been after his father had been chosen. He couldn't make her go through that again. He spent his time sipping from the wine and dozing off and on for the next few hours. There wasn't much to do in the hollow, so he simply passed the time. When he next checked, the moon had risen. It was a full moon. Fitting, he thought, for that was what was supposed to have been his last night. Based upon where it was in the sky, there were only a couple of hours left before the ceremony would have taken place. He wondered what they would do. He had never heard of the king of the bean not being sacrificed before. It had never happened in his time, and if it had happened before, it was never passed on in stories or songs. He ducked back in to keep the hollow warm, and drifted in and out of sleep, keeping an ear out in case they were to come looking for him again in desperation, this close to the end of the year. He was jolted awake by the sound of wolves howling. Lots of wolves howling. There were noises from the other nocturnal creatures in the forest as well. Foxes screamed, owls hooted. One even landed on his little cluster of trees. When he peeked out this time, the moon was at the apex of her journey through the sky. This would have been the moment, right now, where they would have cut his throat. He took a couple of deep breaths of the cold air through the little gap he had made. He was alive. He had made it. Tomorrow, when the sun rose, he could go back to his mother and the rest of the people, and they would see that he didn't have to die for the sun to rise. He stood for a while, just staring at the moon. The forest suddenly dropped into a dead silence. Perhaps all of the humans who had been through earlier hunting for him had shaken them up. He wasn't sure, but he decided to hunker back down to hide and wait for dawn. He drank a bit of the skin he had shared with the brothers, and then a bit more. It was damned eerie in the hollow. If he managed to drink himself into sleep, he could wait for the sun. He finally succeeded in just that, passing into sleep despite the chills of the strangeness that now surrounded him. Something swirled in the snow around the tree. Then more little whirlwinds of snow joined it, more and more, until they descended, unhindered by the hide, down into the hollow. Robin stood in the forest. It was still night. The moon hadn't moved from her point in the middle of the sky. "Why haven't you moved?" he asked her. "You should have been down by now, so I could go home." "It's because you ran and hid, you craven cur!" Robin spun around and saw a gathering of the dead behind him. All of those who had been sacrifices in the past, throats cut wide with blood running down the front of them, his father in their midst. "Your mother might have wept at my death, but at least I gave her another year. You refused to do your duty, and now the world is stuck in the longest night. The moon will stay, the sun will never rise, all because you are a coward." He spat on the ground. "You're no son of mine." "Father, but it's stupid. We don't have to die for the sun. He rises on his own," Robin argued. "Look now. Do you see the sun? Eternal night is what you have brought. We all gave our lives for the people. You gave nothing, so you condemn them. Do you not think we also wanted to live? Are you better than all of us?" The dead started throwing out accusations, drawing closer and closer to him. Robin didn't know what to do. He'd been so sure. Or had he just been so afraid? Fear filled him here, as the angry spectres swept in and drug their claws into him, whilst scolding him for his treachery against traditions. Suddenly, Pharaoh and Rocco came staggering, freshly bloodied, throats gaping at him from the forest. "They thought perhaps we would do, since we were the ones that you left behind when you fled. We were not enough, though. It'll be your mother next, weakling. You've damned us all." "I never meant for this." "Then fix it. You left us to die. Go save your mother." He shook himself awake and jumped from his furs. Waking took away none of those who haunted him, just brought them in closer within the hollow. He crawled out of the hole, their ragged nails clawing at him, raking open bloody gashes on his arms and legs. "Run, you wretch! Run back to the fire and end this!" The moon shone so brightly above him, lighting his way across the stream. Though he fell a number of times, he made it across, soaked to the bone. They herded him through the forest. No path did he follow. He just let them lead him through claws and curses. He shouted and howled in pain as he staggered through the forest, tripping over fallen limbs, branches snagging him as much as the ghostly hunters he had at his heels. Soon he was able to see the glow of fire ahead as he got close to his home. All of the people were standing around the fires, the priests painted, and the center one bearing a blade. I come, I'm here!" They all turned in surprise to watch his stumbling run into their midst. None seemed disturbed by his entourage. Looking up at the moon, the priest smiled as Robin fell to his knees before them, prostrated above the sacrificial bowl and altar. "You made it back in time. We feared you lost. Now give of yourself freely for the new year and for the sun." As he held himself up on his hands and knees, the priest drew the blade across his throat to release the sacred blood that would bring the rise of the sun for the new year. He bore it as best he could, trying not to fall over, until arms braced him, holding him over the bowl. "We knew you wouldn't leave us. Thank you, Robin." He Could have sworn that was Pharaoh. He must have been truly lost. Look at all the tears on his clothes and the scratches from branches that covered him, said another voice that sounded like his brother. As his spirit began to lift from his body, he saw that it was indeed Pharaoh and Rocco who held him up. He looked back to the dead who had chased him back to this place. They were no longer there, none left but his father. Where did they go? They went to watch the sunrise. We who have died for it have found the best places. It is a beautiful sight to behold. You are being judged. You aren't the first who tried to escape their fate, but must return on their own. You caused the moon, but most returned on their own. You caused the moon to freeze the earth until we were able to chase your mewling hide back for your sacrifice. This is unprecedented. You will get to watch your own sunrise, and then it will be decided what to do with you. You do not deserve the honor that your death should bring. You will give them a hard year, as you have fought against it so hard. The moon truly held time? Yes. She cares for our people more than you do. She was willing to hold a moment for your cowardice. It is she who will judge you when this is over. You called it superstition, but only when it was you who was called upon to give yourself up. You held my arms the same way your friends held yours. Weren't they, I thought they were dead. I saw them, Robin said. We used everything we could to get you to return. It shames me that you required the death of your friends and a death threat to your mother to go back. Now come with me, and we will wait out the night and see the sun that rises from your craven sacrifice. I no longer wish to hear your voice, said the shade of Bertram. They sped through the night as spirits until they reached the gathering of the others at the edge of the forest near a cliff that overlooked the sea. They were very far from anywhere Robin had been before. None acknowledged him as they spent the next few hours watching as the moon finished her dance through the sky. Slowly, the night began to fade as a weak light started its climb up from the edge of the sea. The sun was pale as it rose, casting its light upon the earth, the new year beginning. As the light grew, the spirits began to fade, going back to wherever it was that they came from. Were tradition to be believed, they returned now to their afterlife, where they were rewarded for their service in the form of a hall where they spent their time feasting and reminiscing, sometimes watching over those they left behind. Robin looked askance at his father, the last remaining behind. How do I join you? You do not. Not until the moon decrees it. That is your penance. Wander these woods and put the fear into others that they might not share your same fate. Some day you will be free to come back with us, but until then, make them believe. Be good at it, and you might be able to be with us sooner. Do not shame me again, he said, as he too faded away. Robin looked up to his son, saddened by this thought. Ashamed of his actions, he wandered back into the forest, back towards what used to be his home. For the next 50 years, there would be talk in the villages of something in the forest that scared the children, and even scared some of the hunters. It was thought that whatever it was must have been what caused Robin to become lost, and come so close to not being there for his sacrifice. And, in a way, it was.